Welcome into the Sources Say podcast, your go-to Kentucky basketball podcast on the KSR Podcast Network, presented by Club Blue. Club Blue is the official collective partner of the University of Kentucky. I am your host, as always, Jack Pilgrim of Kentucky Sports Radio, and I am stressed. I am unfreaking believably stressed, Shawn Smith. I have a speech impediment because I'm so stressed. All right, let's ride. Shawn, what's going on, buddy? We're wrapping up a ridiculous Mark Pope show, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, me too. I'm not as stressed as you are, but
Stretched.
we've got to talk. Stretched. I'm not as stressed as you are, but here we are. I said a week ago that we would have some more highs, we would have some more lows. Well, this is one of those episodes that are kind of caught in the in between, right? Like we don't want to focus too much on what happened Saturday, but we got to talk about especially those final 4 or 5 minutes. But we also got to look ahead to a big game coming up midweek before we get to a huge road matchup again.
Yeah, it sucks. You go and pull it off against the Volunteers, and you do it in such a convincing way. Like, man, how this team just finds a way. Like they're just so gutsy, and they're just so backs against the wall. They just always figure it out, and that's kind of just what leads to how frustrating Saturday was. So I left Thursday, got down to Austin. My brother and sister-in-law live down in Austin. So I had an all-time weekend down in Austin. Absolute blast. I've been trying to put together this like KSR road trip thing if Stephen Peak works his absolute butt off on those things. Way harder. I'm not going to quit my day job just so Stephen can keep doing these things because it's stressing me out like no other. But the trip was awesome. I had an absolute blast. The arena is really, really, really cool. I just wish they cared about basketball down there because they had no idea there was even a game going on. But that's kind of just what made the game itself so frustrating, because when you play such high-level basketball for 30 minutes, but winnable basketball for 36, and then you just crumble down the stretch, your reaction is just like, man, what is it about this team that you can have the highs that they do and just respond to adversity really well against the best of the best, but it just seems like they never rise to the occasion against the teams, as we have said 10,000 times this year, that you're supposed to beat.
No, this has been a weird year, and I know we keep talking about that. Like you continually beat teams. I think when you look at the AP poll this week, they have 7 wins versus the AP top 25, and so many of those are in the top 6. But and you still got Missouri's in there this week. You still got Alabama again. You still got Auburn. You still got plenty of games that you're going to play against the elite teams in college basketball. But this one the one Saturday, it was frustrating because it wasn't perfect, even in those 35 minutes where they had built a lead to a point to where they had a chance to win the game. But you competed so hard to give yourself a chance, and you just weren't able to close it out. That's the one that frustrates you. It doesn't do a whole lot to your seed line. We've seen that. It hasn't moved a ton. But a win that would have had people looking at you like, man, not only have you won them without Jackson, not only have you won them without Lamont, but you won without both of them on the road against a Texas team that was fighting for any hopes of making a postseason tournament. So, no, it was definitely a frustrating thing. But it's one of those things too, Jack, that I'm all the time saying, you can't microwave things in this. And then that was a group that was on the floor late. In the building at Rupp, you had your own fans. You had built some momentum with Lamont playing minutes, right? Like you'd established somewhat of a rhythm. This was a game where you didn't have him from the start. You didn't have Jackson from the start. Guys were in different roles early. They were able to do well enough to put themselves in position, but they just couldn't close it out. And there's a lot of tape that Mark Pope can look at in that final 4 minutes. I mean, you had guys not even understanding how to inbound the ball without a lot of pressure on them. You had just a no box out. Like, I think Kentucky got tired, and when you get tired, the mental errors start to pop up, and that's what I started seeing in the Final Four, and it cost them.
Yeah, it sucks because they did so much well despite not shooting really well. It just kind of felt like they were gonna, gut out at kind of a rock fight win where, yes, Trey Johnson is playing out of his mind. Like, on the scouting report that he's going to give you everything he's got. I mean, that's a lottery talent who, might be a top 5 pick at the end of the day. You hate seeing Tremont Mark step up the way that he did, and just kind of different guys not stepping up to the occasion. Like on Kentucky side, Kobe Brea, just go down the list. There are a couple, but unlikely heroes for Texas that kind of leveled things out, and just being there, being in the venue, Sean. It was 30% Kentucky fans. I mean, when I say that BBN showed out, and maybe it was just the section I was in, but the UK fans were louder and blue. I was just in the middle of a sea of blue. And it just felt like they were waiting for that opportunity to just kind of say, hey, this is our building. There's a special moment, Sean, and you've been to dozens of them, when you realize that you're about to win on somebody else's home turf. And there's like this excitement, like, yeah, we conquered you on your home floor, that the fan base has, and they get louder. And I experienced it just a couple weeks back in Knoxville. That feeling is just so consuming, and it feels so good that they were waiting for that moment, and just really sucks that was kind of taken away from them, because BBN showed out, man. That was a really cool environment, really cool setting. Texas fans, again, I mean, they have to block off the entire upper level because with screens, because they can't fill the second level. It's all just one lower bowl, and 30% of those fans were Kentucky fans, to tell you how many were there representing Texas. But I feel for the fans that went and wanted that kind of big moment, because it really was a cool trip, cool venue, awesome city. Obviously, Austin is a 10 out of 10. But man, it felt like we were just that close, but obviously, that far.
And you mentioned a moment ago that Kentucky didn't shoot it well. And you thought for a moment they were going to be able to grind one out in a game where they didn't shoot it well without one of their better shooters in Jackson Robinson, without their lead guard Lamont Butler. And we obviously know that Kerr Kriisa is still out. But when you look at it, they were gutting things out for the longest period of that game. They didn't hit a ton of shots early to kind of put them in an advantage like they had against Tennessee and some other games. So I was like, you know what, this right here is winning a game in a different fashion. And it got to the under 8, under 7, and I'm like, man, they're really in position to go win a game in a way that they haven't had to win one yet against a team on the road with this nucleus of players that they have. You got Trent now playing major minutes. You got Travis playing major minutes. Like Colin Chandler goes in, like every single person that was available. The one thing that I wish that maybe they try, and I was talking to somebody about this over the weekend, it was Carr and Amari. I know we don't really like this, but when you're stretched as thin as you are right now, is maybe Garrison and Amari together at some times, just to see what it looks like, just to provide some more on the glass. And then I thought that Garrison had a lot of energy about him, that he could have maybe added something there. But when you got new faces and you're facing foul trouble, Ortega wasn't his best. I know the end stat line, he gets to a high point total, but I thought he took some bad shots because everybody was kind of out of rhythm, right, with this group for a full 40 minutes. I think that Pope, maybe when it got late, he's looking around, because this isn't kind of the group that he's had to really play a full game with. He's always had Jackson, or he's always had Lamont. Now, down the stretch against Tennessee, it's easier because you're only talking about a small part of that game where you didn't have Lamont available. The full 40 is different, Jack. And when you don't have both of them, it kind of changes the way you look at things. And I think that along with some guys not being in those moments on the road, kind of caught Kentucky. But you got to make contact on a box out. That's not where they lost the game, but that certainly felt like the point where it was done, is when they give up that offensive rebound. It was just not paying attention to details. But overall, there still were some good things about it. And I think that Travis and Trent both are getting valuable experience and doing some things now. They both ended up getting caught on some switches and some matchups with Trey that I thought that in a perfect world, that's not where you are defensively in a possession-by-possession game to close. But hey, it's one of those that it didn't crush you. We're seeing that in tournament projections. It's another quad 1 loss. Would have been huge to add that to your resume, especially the way that we know they're evaluating Kentucky with injuries and things. Just get healthy. That's the main message out of all this, Jack, is you just got to get semi-healthy before you can get into postseason play.
And that was my next question for you, because I don't know about you, but my mind shifted after hearing the committee's official thoughts on where this team stood when I was watching that selection show, the top 16 reveal. And Kentucky comes out at, with 5 wins against top 6 competition, and comes in with a number 3 seed and the number 10 seed overall. It was weird for me because it makes you realize, hey, we're in a really good standing with the NCAA. They are valuing the good wins over the mediocre losses more. That bodes so well for Kentucky as they're in the midst of this stretch, just trying to buy time and just kick the can down the road and get to that point healthy as possible, but with as many wins as they can. But it also, I think, it kind of shifted like my mood after the loss of like, man, that's a missed opportunity, because it's only going to be tough sledding this point forward. Like Vandy is going to be a tough out. Alabama is obviously Alabama. And you just do go down the list where you are in such good standing with the committee right now, but how much grace are they going to give you down the stretch if you stack losses? And it's just one of those deals where they're in a fine spot, but you just can't let this turn, let this snowball and have it become hey, they lost 5 of their last 6 of their last 7, something like that. You can't put yourself in that position to make, kind of force the committee's hand and go, well, yeah, they were, depleted by injuries and they have the good wins, but I mean, they have 14 losses. They have 13 losses. Like, I just don't want to give, them any reason to not think that this team's resume is as good as it is. We've already seen that we're in a good spot with them, but that's what turns Wednesday into a must-win for me. You gotta find these little pockets and just, assume that you're not going to go down to Tuscaloosa and win that one. I wouldn't rule that out, but you just can't assume that you're going to go down there and win. So when you have just 6 games left on the schedule, Shawn, that's what puts just an absolute microscope on this game on Wednesday. And I hate throwing that must win phrase around, but it does kind of feel like that's where what we're in right now.
It does, and when you're getting to this point in the season, you're not wanting to go on a losing streak, right? And they're not healthy. They're not even close to 100%. But don't get swept by Vandy. Like, you got to find a way in your building to get this one, and then see where you are health wise, roster wise, availability, all those things going into Saturday, and then you kind of just push all your chips in Tuscaloosa and see what happens. The next 2 Saturdays are just massive opportunities. And if you were at full strength, you're feeling much better about it. But to me, and maybe I'm the only one that feels this way, maybe this is an overall feeling, but Saturday night was the first time where I felt like just kind of empty about the result, where I was like, man, I'm not giving an excuse because they have guys out, even though it is a very good reason. You still played well enough to put yourself in position to win that game. If you're going to do that, you got to find a way to close it. And I'm sure Mark Pope feels the exact same way, that he's not going to sit there and be like, man, Lamont and all these guys are out. That's why we lost. No, you played well enough for 35-36 to put yourself in position to get a massive win that could have, lifted the team even more, because you're thinking, man, we went to Texas and played a desperate team, beat them with guys that was not even in the rotation a month ago. You don't. But here's the other side of this, though. Does it feel like at points throughout this SEC season, you've talked about the games that they win that we don't expect them to win, and then they lose the games that even at short of some guys, we don't expect them to lose? I wouldn't change any of them. Like, if you give me that week all over again, I would take beating Tennessee at home over beating Texas on the road. I would take beating Mississippi State on the road over beating Georgia on the road. I would take, well, maybe I shouldn't go there. Maybe I shouldn't say I would take beating Tennessee over beating John Calipari at Rupp Arena. But, just those games where it's a back-to-back, where they win one and then they go lose one, or they lose and then they win. I wouldn't flip those just because of what those wins have done. That's why they're a 3 seed. is because of the wins. The losses not done a whole lot to damage the resume. It's kind of just an opportunity. If you go get another one, then you can add to it. But I don't even know if they'd have climbed to a 2 line had they won Saturday, but they didn't fall a seed line. That was the big part. You fall if you lose another one. Here, you can't lose the one coming up.
That's my only the only thing that makes this tricky is you're sitting there right now with 8 losses. You go, all right, that it's tough, but you still have 6 more to go. And I have a hard time believing they'll lose out. And there's still a path for them to go, steal one down in Tuscaloosa, and then you're right back on track to where you kind of hoped you would have been going into that Texas game. But 8, the committee can justify those 8 losses because they have 8 ridiculously good wins and 7 historically good wins. But what is the difference in their mind between 8 quality losses, no bad losses, but when you add in just by sheer quantity of total losses, what is that line, Shawn, for the committee where they say, all right, now we do have to favor the losses over, because like you said, it hasn't hurt yet, but is it once they get to the double digit seed line, or the loss mark, is that where the committee starts to go, all right, you're starting to worry us a little bit? What does that look like? What does the rest of the season look like for the committee to continue to value these wins the way that they are right now?
I think the one thing, if you're asking me here, I think the one thing that the committee would like to see is, can Kentucky get Lamont and Jackson back and then have a stretch of maybe it's just a game or 2 regular season SEC tournament to evaluate what they look like as a whole. And then I think it's easier to evaluate them without those guys, because then you look and be like, okay, Kentucky's playing well. They go to the SEC tournament, they win a couple of games. And then you can kind of look at this thing on Selection Sunday and then kind of choose. But look at the top. I mean, the quad ones, there's crazy that there's nothing in the quad two, but they've not played any. So everything in the Q1, and you're right, those 8 wins, the teams that they've beaten, I mean, the teams that are 2 of them on a 1 seed line, 1 of them is on a 2 and was right there for a 1. And then you've got Mississippi State on the road, a Texas A&M team that's there, a Louisville team that's in the top 25. And things. So, I mean, the wins have done enough. You can't discredit anything because of how good their wins are. This is a season that's been kind of, you win one and then you lose one, but it kind of evens itself out. I don't think I've ever truly experienced anything like this following a team, especially since I've been working in the media side of things. That when you look at it, you're like, if you win it, man, it looks really good on your resume. If you lose it, it doesn't hurt you. And they've avoided those games. Now, losing a quad 2 game, another one coming up at Rupp Arena, I think those are the ones that start to drop you and hurt you. And that's why you got to be able to avoid this Wednesday night. But I think that if they can find a way shorthanded to, let's say they beat LSU, they beat Vandy, they beat Oklahoma, let's say they lose both Alabama, Auburn, but find a way maybe healthy at the end to beat Missouri, then I think that they're still being evaluated accurately and in a position that's a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. But if you can get those guys back for a stretch, then I think regardless of what happens the next week or so, it will determine how the committee overall evaluates Kentucky on Selection Sunday. If they can just get another look. When's the last time that we had a look at this team fully healthy and available? It's been a while. It's hard to go back.
First week of
and
December.
Let's face it, too. I do think that there's some recency that when you look at this, the committee looks at teams down the stretch because it's a fresh look. Teams that start playing well in the final couple of weeks and in conference tournament, they get a bump, it seems like, because it's like, man, that team's hot right now. If you remember, they used to put up the records of last 10. What is the record in the last 10 games going into the NCAA tournament? Now, you've gone away from that in recent years, but let's be honest, Jack. It's hard to go back and remember how you evaluated someone in December. That game was so long ago. How are you playing now? And that's where if they're hovering around that 3 seed line and they can get healthy, then you're starting to really evaluate Kentucky in a complete whole product on the floor. I think that's probably the biggest thing that's got to happen is you got to find a way to get Jackson back, and you got to find a way to get Lamont in here before you get to Nashville. And if you can do that, then you're playing with all your chips. And if you got that, then we'll see what happens with Kerr. But to me, what would be full strength in my mind right now is Jackson and Lamont.
Yeah, share an update on what Mark Pope had to say, and we also got a big time update from Pope on Kerr Kriisa and what his future in blue and white looks like. We'll address that right after we talk about our friends with Club Blue. Club Blue is the official collective partner of the University of Kentucky. Club Blue was founded by UK fans strictly to support the NIL efforts at the University of Kentucky. Unlike most collectives, 100% of subscriber money and 100% of donor money goes directly to NIL. Club Blue charges no fees. Club Blue subscribers receive some amazing benefits like invitations to special events, meet and greets with UK athletes, signed merchandise, monthly giveaways, ticket giveaways, Club Blue merch, and more. Subscribe today at www.clubbluenil.com. You get to pick which sport you want to support when you sign up. Choose your sport and support with Club Blue. Shawn, tonight was a big one from Mark Pope. Part of the reason why I was in stressful mess to start this thing. He talked about both Jackson Robinson and Lamont Butler. The just reading between the lines with Lamont, and definitely more optimistic, if you ask me, than what we heard from about Jackson Robinson. The gist of it with Lamont Butler was that, it's, sounds like more of a pain tolerance thing, but they're just really concerned about a potential setback where, just can't take a hard hit and re-aggravate that shoulder, because we do kind of go back to square one like we just dealt with the Tennessee win and him going down those last 8 minutes. So the quote on Lamont was, for Lamont, he's actually moving pretty well. He still hasn't practiced with live play, but for him, it's just a matter of how far along does he have to get where he could actually take a hit in the game. That's the biggest question for him. That's going to be a little bit of a guessing game, and we'll try to get him some live stuff in practice over the next week or so. First reaction on that one.
I think with Lamont, it's about getting him to a point to where you mentioned the setback, right? Like, if you bring him back too soon and then something happens, you're probably putting yourself in position like you don't get him back, right? The deeper you get in this thing. So it's about surviving without him for a stretch here. And then let's see, do you get him back maybe the last week of the regular season, maybe a game before that last week? Get him to a point to where that you hopefully avoid a setback, Jack, and then you kind of ride him the rest of the year, right? Like you don't want to risk the setback again, because another setback comes and you're maybe 2 weeks and now you're in the NCAA tournament. And I think that's the thing, is you're playing the long game here, but a relatively short window to play the long game. That's why you got to be very careful about how you evaluate this. So I think Lamont, to me, if you can get him back as the lead guard for this team, can we just not dive on the floor near midcourt? It's part of it, I get, but man, and it was just happened to be that shoulder too, and I'm just like, man, this is not what you want. But hey, he plays the game with all out effort. So if you can get him back soon, it would be a big boost for this team, and then obviously Jackson as well.
Obviously the target that you would love to see is that Auburn game. Dick Vitale shared his own update talking to Pope and said, talking to Pope, it did not sound super optimistic about him playing in Tuscaloosa either this weekend, which sucks. You're going to be in the almost identical situation that you were down in Austin, where you're just like, all right, PG1 Travis Perry, 20 plus minute Trent Noah, 25 plus minute Ansley Almanor. What you got? Can you guys be the difference? What can Colin Chandler give you? Can he step up defensively against some elite Alabama guards? Like, just what does that look like? We saw Andrew Carr struggling the way he did against Grant Nelson in the first matchup. How does that look like with Andrew not looking great, but probably better than we saw in that first matchup? It's just that's a really, really tricky one with the timing, where you just kind of say, let's just hope for the best. But then once you get past that, Sean, what is that kind of ideal target return date? If you do account for like, hey, if you do see a setback, this could lead into SEC tournament play. This could lead into NCAA tournament. What would be ideal in your eyes looking at that schedule?
Well, when you look at it, you're talking SEC tournament. Like, I don't know if that's the ideal stretch to bring anybody back because it's games on top of games on top of games, and I think that gets tough to navigate from maybe a load management standpoint. So ideally, you would like to see this thing maybe be the last week of the regular season at least, to then you've got a week of play, and then you can go into Nashville in the SEC tournament. I think it'll be tough to bring somebody back in that moment because we don't know what the bracket's going to fall. And I know we'll throw up the SEC standings here in a minute, Jack. But if you're talking, you play, let's say a night game, and then you turn around and you got another game, or you got that afternoon game. That's a lot. So hopefully Kentucky can get relatively healthy enough. But I mean, look at how many teams projected in the tournament now? 13? 13 SEC teams in the tournament field. And look, I mean, the majority of the top 25 is in the top half of the SEC standings here. You got obviously a lot of teams in that 8 to 6 win range and things. But when you look at this, I mean, Kentucky's got to win against Florida. They got to win against A&M. They got 2 against Tennessee, like 1 against Mississippi State. Like they've done well. But I just would love, and I don't know if we're going to get it, right? Like I just think it's maybe a stretch, but those games against Auburn and Alabama, if you could have just been at full strength to go on the road and come back here. But if you can find a way to steal one of those, and maybe it's the one in your building a little over a week from now, but I think that final week of the regular season to me is what I'm circling as I would love to see Kentucky at full strength playing LSU and playing Missouri before they go into the league tournament.
Yeah, with Jackson Robinson tonight, the quote from Mark Pope for Jax, he still hasn't done anything with his right hand. He's done a lot of left-handed shooting, and probably unsurprisingly, he's making a lot of shots left-handed. So I'm actually pushing him to just tie up the right wrist, just get that thing safe in a big cast, and let's go play lefty on Wednesday. I'm not sure he's prepared to do that. And then Tom Leach joked, well, Goose can coach him up. And then Pope said, yeah, we're in negotiations right now trying to figure that out. Those guys are working really hard to try and get better. Don't love that, being totally transparent with you, Sean. I mean, when you're talking a right shooting wrist that, for the shooter, not a good situation to be in. And for them to even, again, they're joking. Mark Pope is talking tongue in cheek, like, not obviously going to put a cast on him and go play lefty and go all Larry Bird on Vanderbilt on Wednesday. But if we're having tongue in cheek comments like that, doesn't make me feel super optimistic about him returning anytime soon. But there is a severity level in Pope's comments that, if they did receive a damning response opinion from doctors or whatever, if results came back worse off than they had thought, you'd probably start warning your fan base and kind of letting them down, and kind of just letting them down easy a little bit, like, hey, didn't receive the best news on Jackson. Let's hope for the best, pray for the best, but not looking good. Just keep praying for me. Like, had it been that kind of tone, then you can start to kind of think in your head, okay, well, this dude might be out for the year. But the way Pope was talking, if he's willing to joke in that manner, it kind of to me sounds like he's not returning anytime soon, but he's not out for the year. Is that the vibe that you get hearing that?
That's the same vibe that I get, and that's why I keep talking about that last week, and maybe even if it's not LSU on March 3rd, but if you can get everybody available on March 8th at Missouri, that gives you that one game, and then you got the full week to prepare for Nashville. So no, I'm not ready to jump in and hit the panic button yet on that. Let's go another week, because I do think that we're to a point, if we're ruling out Wednesday, I think we're ruling out Saturday. at this point. And then you get into next week and you see, where you are. And is that a Wednesday game at Oklahoma or a Tuesday game?
That is a Wednesday game.
That's another Wednesday game. So you got another day. You're not playing on a Tuesday. So you're playing Wednesdays these 2 weeks. So I think that's another angle that you kind of look at, that you got that extra day to kind of see where you are. But now I'm kind of looking at this, Jack, of these next 4: Vandy at home, Alabama on the road, Oklahoma on the road, Auburn at home. Just find a way to go 2-2. And any combination of two. Like if you ask me, though, obviously you want to beat Auburn and Alabama, but
would it make you more frustrated though if you won those 2 and you lost the others?
No, in a way, yeah, and then no, because I'm confident that if this team lines up against a good team in the NCAA tournament, they're going to have a chance to win. That's just how I feel. Now, if that first game may scare me, if they're a 3 seed or a 4 seed, I may sweat it out. But I'd like to
weekend. I mean, you start feeling, well, shoot, what's stopping us from going to a Final Four? Like, but then you do worry about that first game and go, ugh.
It's like I said, I don't know if anything's kind of messed with my evaluation of a team more than this team has, because I know how to evaluate what they do on the floor, but I don't know how to evaluate the results because I just don't know what to make of them. But that's where maybe I do, because we've been saying this. It's the league. I'm telling you, it's the league. Like, this is the league. 6-6. If any other year we're talking 6-6 in this league, we're sitting here talking about, man, this is a total failure of a Kentucky basketball season. They're 6-6 in the league and projected a 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. Like, what world at any point before this does that make any sense? But that's because the league is so strong. And what Auburn's done running through 11-1, I didn't think was possible. And I do think that they've got some down the stretch here that's going to obviously test them and give them some things. But they go on the road and they pick up a big win, over the weekend. So it's just, when you look at that league tournament is going to be unbelievable. I mean, that league tournament, if you come out of that thing with the league championship trophy, this might be the year that you actually hang a banner for it. You know what I mean? Because dang, it's going to feel like you're going to a Final Four and win a national championship, because it may end up being the Final Four when you look at it 2 or 3 weeks later. But it is frustrating. The frustrating part for me was, as a basketball coach Saturday, is I saw them do well enough to give themselves a chance, and then in return they actually beat themselves. Mm-hmm. That's the part that got you. It wasn't as much sure, they made shots. 2 guys scored. But at the end of the day, I thought Kentucky had enough. They had done enough. And then they kind of just let go of the rope there down the stretch and just made so many mental mistakes that you're not going to win a possession-by-possession game in that moment. And I thought it was an opportunity to take a massive step forward without some guys to win it. They couldn't do it. I think I would have liked to have seen them maybe post Amari more down the stretch. Maybe not as much from the middle third of the floor, driving and getting into the post, but I'm talking just put somebody on your back and go post and give some looks there. Otega shot some shots that I thought were bad shots at times. He took a couple of threes that I'm like, man, what are you doing there? But then again, like, how is he feeling? Kobe's not making shots. Does Otega then put it on his shoulders to go, I've got to make shots. I've got to make shots. It throws everybody out. But man, they were right there with enough, Jack, to get one. And that's one that they'll learn from, right? They're going to come back here Wednesday night and be better prepared, I think, if they're in that stretch. And it's going to be a close one. I'm fully confident that this thing's going to be close Wednesday night, and then the Kentucky will have to make plays down the stretch to win it. And this game coming up is the biggest game of the season because it's the next one. It's massive.
Sound like Mark Pope.
Well, it's true. It's a massive game. Just because you know what waits Saturday and you know what awaits next week. Like, got to get this one. If they can stay 500 or a game above and they get 9-10 wins in the conference season, I think it's a big win, especially with the guys they've had out.
We'll talk a little bit more about what Mark Pope had to say. But first, another message from our friends at Circus Sports Kentucky. The best time of the year is here. I mean, look, we're 4 weeks away from Selection Sunday. We got SEC tournament in 3 weeks. I mean, it's do or die time when we were talking about our friends at Circus Sports Kentucky, the best app to bet college basketball. Circus Sports Kentucky is sports betting the way it should be, with high and transparent betting limits, the lowest holds, and exceptional customer service. It doesn't matter when they take the court, whether it's spreads, props, futures, or in game. Circus Sports is the place to bet college basketball fun and bet like a pro from anywhere, anytime. Download your new bookie today at circusports.com. Must be 18 or older for Kentucky. Problem gambling services, call or text 1-800-426-2537. Shawn, big time update tonight from Mark Pope about Kerr Kriisa and his future in blue and white. I have hated just how vague things have gotten with him talking about like just what his return timeline looked like. I mean, just remember when he went down with his broken foot back in December, the very first run of the first injury timeline was 3 to 6 weeks. And like, as time has gone on and on and on, every time Mark Pope's been asked about it, it's been like, yeah, he's moving. He's happy. He likes life. Well, he's a great dude. You're like, well, wait, you didn't say anything about the injury. How's he doing? He's God, yeah, Kerr. It's Kerr, and you just kind of got that sense with him. You're like, okay, this rehab is not going as quickly as they thought it would. And again, you felt you wanted to feel optimistic with that initial timeline, but when you just look on the surface and just put 2 and 2 together, broken foot, middle of the season, why in the world would anybody assume that guy was going to be able to come back? He's a smaller guard that works in his favor rather than, a big, heavy, big or something like, the circumstances are favorable for him. It happened extremely early in the season instead of midway or late. So like there were some things, but still you just kind of were like, I mean, I'm going to take Kentucky's word for it when they say that it's not a season-ending injury, but we'll see. We got an official update from Mark Pope tonight, was asked about it on his call-in show, about the possibility of a medical red shirt with him. If he is not able to give it a go this season, does that mean that his time in Lexington has come to a close? Mark Pope says no. Exact quote said, Kerr could get a medical red shirt because he meets the qualifications. The two qualifications are less than 30% of the games played. He's barely played under 30% and has not played past the midpoint. So that is a possibility. And then did kind of clarify and didn't totally rule out a return this year. Right now, I know he's anxiously trying to get back into this thing. The recovery has been probably a little bit slower than any of us would like. That's going to continue to be an ongoing process. So we have seen Kerr just around the facilities at these games, no longer in the boot. He's moving well. You see him in the videos shooting, warm-up shots and hitting the half-court shots. And like he's a participant socially, but not competitively. How do you think about, what do you think about Pope's comments tonight about his status for this upcoming season? Are you still holding out hope for him to play? And what does a sixth year of Kerr Kriisa in college basketball look like, assuming it would be back in Lexington?
This late into it, I would rather him take the medical redshirt year and be back on Kentucky's roster next year. I just feel like that for him and for the program, I feel like it's more of an impact. Now, if he were to come back, let's say this week, and get 6 games, SEC tournament, NCAA tournament, then I think the payoff for him and this team it's better. But I don't want to cheat him either. So the fact that we're not ready and he's mentioning medical redshirt, I'm starting to kind of lean towards you won't see Kerr this year, but at least be in a position to be able to take a medical redshirt a year from now. And look, if you can add a veteran guard that's played then 5-6 years of college basketball to next year's team, I'm all in on it, especially with how many guys we know Kentucky's losing off this one just because of seniors alone. I'm perfectly fine with him being a part of next year's roster as a veteran guard. But you're to a point here, when he got hurt, you didn't think that you'd lose Lamont as well
Mm-hmm.
for a stretch. You didn't think you'd lose Jackson for a stretch. Lamont to me is the most impactful guy to get back, and then Jackson for this team. And if you can get those two back with the way the freshmen have come along and kind of carved out a role, and Trent Noah's going to have a role even if Lamont and Jackson are back. Travis Perry is going to be able to play minutes for you in postseason play. Like, those guys are now ready to play roles, maybe just not the role that they have right now. Kerr, to me, Jack, I just don't see being able to work yourself in without being off since early December till now. Like, that's almost the full season that you're out. I think that you're better suited for both sides to take the medical red shirt and be a part of this team next year. And I'm perfectly cool with that if that's the way this plays out.
My only caveat to it is it cannot be as the vet that this roster desperately needs in terms of like the complementary vet, the physical defensive mind. Like, the guy that you're losing with Lamont Butler leaving doesn't exist with who's coming in. I think Jasper Johnson is going to be a very, very good talent. I think
I think Pope knows that too, though.
Right. You are bringing him back with the assumption that he is an added depth piece as an extremely good veteran, like leadership kind of role, presence in that locker room. A guy who, this would be a 6th year of college basketball that's played at every high major level that there is possible. I think he's checked all the boxes among the power conferences at this point. And you would bring him back with almost like an extension of the coaching staff at that point. Like, you bring him back to be the guy for Jasper and a Caden to lean on, to be the guy like, hey, I can, I've been through hell and back in this, in college basketball. Here's what you do in this situation. Here's how you respond to adversity. Here's how, if you get injured, here's how you respond to it. Because I got it hurt, just show the video of him going back and making a play on that ball when after he broke his foot in that Gonzaga game. Like, just it's a perfect guy to have in your building, but that doesn't mean that I want him playing 30 plus minutes next season in a Kentucky uniform. Like, there's a balance there. It's a nuanced conversation you have to have when addressing it, but like, you're still going to need a strong, physical, defensive minded guy, because a Caden, solid defender, but you want somebody with experience there. Jasper, more offense than defense, slight in stature, those things. Kerr Kriisa is obviously not a mammoth of a man. You got to find some size, you got to find some physicality and some toughness in the portal, and you don't have that with any of the 3 guys who would be penciled in for next season.
You don't, but you can already see the value of having him because you're living in it right now. Like, we would all take Kerr Kriisa right now on this team because of the injuries that have already stacked to Lamont and Jackson. That's the value of having him back, because you never know when something like this year is going to happen. And it's not common that you see it happen at one spot. It would be your 2 lead point guards and then the guy that would take over the point guard position if they were out. So I think that's the value, but you're absolutely right. You bring it back more of as an insurance piece than you do for a guy that's going to play 25, 26, 27, 28 minutes, maybe 30 minutes for you. You got to go get someone else in the portal, but it provides an avenue there to where you can avoid, hopefully, what you're running into this year, because your freshman class wasn't ready 3 or 4 weeks ago. They're getting there now. They've been forced into action because of injuries to the guys that you brought in. Next year's freshman class, I think, is going to be more impactful and able to help right away, because they're going to carry a more prominent role because of the talent that they have and bring with them. You've got a freshman class right now that's getting valuable experience that's going to be able to provide something as sophomores. But if you can get a veteran guard that can spot you minutes, can make shots, can add an energy to the locker room and a veteran presence there, but also provide you something just in case you do have an injury or two. Like, if you could have had Kerr Kriisa for the last few games, I think they win at Texas. I think they find a way to maybe win at Vandy. and some things if some guys are out. Like you've got a different confidence about you if you can know where you're going. And I think that would be probably the biggest payout for him being in Kentucky again next year would be that added value.
And there's some people, Cameron Marvin, asking realistically who comes back. Some talk about Otega Owe and just the roster. You do wonder when you look at those numbers, if you can pencil in Kerr with that group as well. That Otega Owe is an interesting one, because as of like a month ago, I talked to somebody very close with Otega, and even as he was kind of finding his groove as the most consistent guy on Kentucky against legitimate competition, said that the plan for him was still to come back for another year for his senior season in Lexington. Loves Mark Pope. Like, they've done a really bang up job of putting him in position to succeed. And, the personalities with him and Pope really work well together. So Otega is just kind of battling that line of what does his status look like in the draft if he does come back? Like, what does his upside look like? Is he coming back to be, how much stock does he have to raise at that point? That's where things get a little complicated. But it was still, based on what I've heard, Otega would like to come back, and obviously he would get quite the pay raise for what he was getting this year. Well deserved. He's been incredible for Kentucky all season long. But I would pencil him in, not pencil, but I would feel confident about him coming back next season. Never can assume that anybody is coming back when you're talking about the three freshmen: Travis Perry, Trent Noah, Colin Chandler. On paper, they're all supposed to come back, and I've heard that I haven't heard anything to suggest any of them are like discontent, like worried about their role and thinking that they're already kind of anticipating a departure. I have not heard anything to suggest that that's on the table for any of those three guys. But you do wonder, like, just with so many mouths to feed in the portal world, where there's one phone call away from, hey, we're offering you 30 minutes a game and $1 million. The dream of playing at Kentucky can be pretty short-lived if there's actual tangible promises being made on the other side of that phone. So just kind of, where do things stand with you? I based on where things stand, I feel good about everybody with eligibility remaining returning for Kentucky, but that does become a numbers crunch that you do kind of have to keep in mind, Shawn.
It does. It really does. When you're talking about the freshmen that you've already have, you're bringing in, if Kerr's a medical year, there's another guy, and then Owe, you would like to see return. Obviously, he's going to have a decision. He's performed so well that he's probably put himself in position to, I don't know how much better you can get as a prospect with another year. If he likes playing at Kentucky and likes being a star on a team, and the NIL money matches it, then I think that there's a chance there. As far as the freshmen, Jack, I think I'm confident that Noah and Perry are here. Maybe not as much Chandler. I want to see kind of how the spring goes with him, because he's obviously in a different area and category with that freshman class. He's already had a couple of years off. This was a transition and a move from a commitment to BYU to Kentucky, that I could see possibly something else being available for him if he chooses to do so, but could also see the path that he's here as a sophomore as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that Mark Pope and this group would love to have all three of those guys back. Retention, I think, was going to be hard in year one. Garrison's a guy that I think, if he's back, just takes a massive step up next year.
I feel good about him being back.
He's been a very beneficial piece to this team, but I think he continues to get better and better and better. And I could see him making a massive impact and being one of the better bigs in the SEC a year from now. And if you can get that with Owe, then I like where Kentucky's then targeting the portal. And I think going out and getting a point guard, a veteran guard, I think would be a big deal. A guy that can kind of provide some of the things that Lamont provides. And then you kind of look and at that stretch four spot, a long guy that can defend and also shoot the ball is another area I think this roster could use from a veteran presence. So it's still too early, But I think you can kind of look at this, and I have a ton of confidence, like I said, in Trent and Travis to be back. I'm keeping kind of open on Chandler just to see what's available for him and maybe how he feels about it, like after the season's over.
Yeah, and I know that they've pushed when Garrison came here, they kind of put him on a 2-year path and said, "Hey, this is Amari's team for right now. We're going to develop you and put you in position to where, like, when you get the bulk of the minutes in year 2, is a 25 plus minute per game guy. That's going to be your time to explode, and you're going to be a draft pick next season." So that he's always been a long-term guy for this staff, and he was really comfortable with that plan initially. And I think that's why he's probably one of the safest bets. He hasn't had that explosive, he's had explosive moments, but he hasn't had an explosive year in terms of consistency to justify a jump right now. So I the number crunch is there, and something to be, something to keep in mind where, BG's not going to be, forced out with like, hey, there's, not enough mouths to feed. Sorry, have a nice day. He's a guy that you can bank on as an anchoring piece. Otega Oweh is one of the best players on this team right now, just as he'd be one of the best players on next year's team. He ain't getting forced out, and nobody's going to get forced out. But you get what I'm saying. Just, the idea of them is forced out. Where what does your path look like if you want to, play the minutes that if you want to come and sit the bench, then, sure, they'd be happy to take everybody. That's just something to keep in mind as we monitor that.
They've gotten more. The one thing that has happened in the last 3 weeks, Shaq, is they've gotten stuff out of the freshman class that I did not expect them to get out of them this year, and I think that bodes well for your program, your outlook as sophomores. But more so, I'm starting to see a path where Travis Perry and Trent Noah make impactful plays as juniors and seniors in this program, possibly like on down the road even further than what we're seeing. And I wasn't really sure of it 2 or 3 weeks ago because they just hadn't had the opportunity to do so. So retention looks a lot different to me now than it did 3 weeks ago, because now you're getting some valuable pieces in this thing that have actually played some minutes, and you could get some real experience back next year if it all works out for you.
And that, if you are going to look at hey, what is the bright side to, there's no bright side to Lamont Butler going out with his injury, Kerr Kriisa being hurt as long as he has, because this team with all of those guys at full strength was a Final Four team. But if you were to kind of find the optimism there, it's that, hey, Trent Noah is playing a role now that you can bank on him next year being a guy. And, if, he probably would have had a decision to make had he not gotten this role, expansion, and the way he has been able to step into this role and thrive with it, with the production, he probably could have been one of those guys where, like, maybe I need to get my shot somewhere else. But he is now seeing what that success looks like in this, in a Kentucky jersey, where, now you can say, hey, like, I can be that guy every single year. Travis Perry, started his first game as a freshman last night, or a couple nights ago in Austin, Texas. Like, you can see the vision with him as well. So I think things are trending where they need to be, even if it means some short-term lumps that are frustrating in the meantime. So we'll before we start wrapping up, one last final note from our friends at Monticello Bank. Enjoy the home court advantage with Monticello Bank's HELOC special, and use the equity you've built in your home to finance special home projects and improvements. Score big with a fantastic introductory rate and attractive closing costs. With 20 locations in 14 counties across Kentucky, we're just around the corner. So hurry in and speak with one of our mortgage lenders about this limited time offer today. Find us on the web at mbcbank.com. Monticello Bank, where people matter. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. It's a couple more minutes before we wrap this thing up. If you have any questions in the chat, make sure you let us hear that. But anything that you want to kind of not gloss over, and if you missed anything in that Texas loss that you want to make sure that we hit, or something that you desperately need to see this team do beyond just winning the game on Wednesday, because I think that's kind of the obvious one that we're all thinking as a must win matchup.
I think obvious is simple, and the obvious side of this and the simple part of it, just go beat Vandy on Wednesday night. But when you go down the stretch of that game, I think Mark Pope has film to teach, and that's the thing with coaching, Jack, is it's all an opportunity to teach. And he had an opportunity the last 2 days, the last 48 hours to teach his guys, how to not let that happen again. Because when this season started, I don't know if any of us would have predicted that Travis Perry and Trent Noah would have been playing impactful minutes in the final 4 or 5 minutes of a tight game at Texas in mid-February. And that's hard if you can prepare for it in practice, but you can't simulate it. And that game experience, I mean, look, a turnover inbounding the basketball when they had no business turning it over. That was a lack of communication, not being where you're supposed to be, guys in different roles, inbounding the basketball, new guys receiving the basketball. Like it's different in that moment when pressure hits. But to me, it's about getting through those things and sticking together. And I'm sure Mark Pope maybe showed the tape where some guys probably got caught up in the emotions of it down the stretch too. You had Otega Owe holding his hands out and frustrated, and him as a leader probably in that moment doesn't need to show hands up. He's probably more like, hey guys, look, that it's on me or it's on us, and get it fixed. And they almost did it again. They almost had two. Missed a box out. Those things are teachable moments that Mark Pope was able to come out of that game and show to his team to be able to avoid them again, whether that's the group that's on the floor for you, or if you're healthy here in a few weeks, you're going to be back in that same moment again, and you got to be ready for it. But this one in your building helps, but I think you got to go win it.
Athir Kader said that he had a question, but going back to the super chat, just kind of said we're going to be challenged all season long, but not to be in the top 3 is an embarrassment to the program. I'm not seeing that. Just being totally honest, and I love the passion, love the I appreciate wanting to be in the top 3. I would love to be in the top 3 as well, but this was a season that you just kind of knew that if they were totally healthy, had no injury setbacks whatsoever, then yeah, you could possibly flirt with that. Being number 10 right now in the NCAA selection committee's eyes is, not too far off of that number 3 slot. They have beaten teams in that top 3 right now. So there's a lot to be proud of, a lot to be excited for, but you just can't look at this season and not, have some grace. I hate moving goalposts, but this is, if there's ever a time to move goalposts, it's with this group, and just what the short-term expectations are while keeping the main thing with long-term expectations, Sean.
Yeah, and I see somebody ask about, is there any chance to be in a 2 seed? If you go out and you find a way to to beat Alabama and you find a way to beat Auburn, you're probably starting to at least talk about it, right? If you're on a 3 line now. How do you evaluate the SEC tournament this year if you're the committee? Like, how do you evaluate it? Is this the year that you pay attention to Sunday? Because does the team that win the league tournament, should you pay attention to it a little bit more when 13 of the teams in the league make up your field right now? You probably should pay attention to every single game in the league tournament. Yeah. Like, that's how I feel about it this year, that all eyes should be on Nashville. You're not looking at the ACC unless somebody just becomes a bid stealer. Like, you're not looking there. All eyes should be on Nashville.
And Michael Josie asked, what about Almanor? There was some, like a week of buzz about that 5th year, 5 to play 5 rule that kind of plateaued a little bit. It's, I haven't seen any movement on that publicly. So I would probably table any Ansley Almanor possibilities for right now, but we'll obviously see. We see news updates randomly pop up out of nowhere on random Thursday night, so maybe that could be one of them, but it doesn't sound like there's movement towards that. I wouldn't pencil him in if that's the case. Kerr has at least an example, a legitimate reason to explain why he would be able to get a medical red shirt as Mark Pope went through all the specifications tonight. He also, I want to get your thoughts. I thought this is really funny, Sean, before we wrap up. Was asked about a fan just kind of point blank asked him, hey, what'd you think of those lane violations called on Kentucky on Saturday night? And he said, in fairness to the referees, it was a hard call. When you watch the video, Amari's was much more clear, but made it very clear that like those were not lane violations. And then said, the referees are working every day to get better in a really, really hard job. Hopefully we'll all continue to get better. And like that's his version of an F off, like we don't hear that from him ever, but like that was the closest that we're gonna get to him actually publicly criticizing without getting fined. Like he was so polite about it and was like, hey man, this is a really good, we all make mistakes. We know this job is really, really difficult. So like his version of criticizing the officiating when it's impossible to criticize them without getting fined nowadays.
No, that's pretty funny. Like, obviously that's a smart response. I will tell you this. I saw it enough Saturday night, and I've seen it enough across basketball this year, lane violations on free throws, that we took the time yesterday to discuss, do you understand with our team what is a lane violation and why on a free throw? Like,
you need to explain it to Doug Shows then, bro. Like you go pick up the phone and call him then.
Like, I saw it enough and I saw it being called, and I'm like, you know what? This is something that we haven't discussed. So we took a brief 3, 4, 5 minutes of practice yesterday just to talk about and demonstrate, like, hey, okay, you guys know this, right? Like, never assume. But those were pretty bad calls.
Well, it's a must win officially on Wednesday. I always makes me cringe whenever that phrase gets thrown out there because, if we lose that one, then the next one becomes a must win. And, like, how a punishment without a crime without a punishment isn't a crime. Like that, it's kind of that exact same vibe with that, where it's like, okay, well, what happens then if they don't win the must win, and the next one becomes it. But it's a really important game for Kentucky to win, to just kind of keep the wheels from falling off in a time where the wheels are very, they could very easily, the wheels could, and it's
the biggest game on the schedule.
It's the biggest game of the season because
it's the next game.
It's the biggest game of the season. It's going to be a tough one. It really is. Vandy's a good team. They're well coached. I think Byington, I think he's doing a really bang up job for how he constructed this roster with zero resources at Vandy. Like I think he's a pretty darn good coach, and he's definitely going to come in to the same way we talked about that Vandy game down in Nashville. He's going to come into Rupp Arena looking to win that game because they need it for their own resumes and their own schedule. So like this is an important game for them. You just got to find a way. I don't care if it's 54-53 final Kentucky wins. It could be the ugliest slugfest I've ever seen in my life, where I'd rather watch paint dry than that game again. But as long as Kentucky has more points, that's all that matters. Just get by. Assume that you're not going to get your guys back. Jackson's going to be out. Lamont's going to be out. Just find a way. See if you can make incremental growth and just kind of chip away at this season as we inch closer toward postseason play.
That's the goal. Get healthy, get a win Wednesday, and then after Wednesday you can evaluate Saturday.
Well, Sean, it's been a fun one. I'm ready to get some actual sleep. I got in last night from Austin at 1:00, and didn't get to sleep in. It's been I'm just running on fumes, but hey, that's life in the SEC. Got to rally, got to keep moving this thing forward. Just like you got to keep this thing moving forward. You got your life hectic as well with coaching, and we're both inching closer toward the finish line. So Sean, let's wrap this thing up. Where can fans find your work?
Yeah, hopefully Steven will put it up here because I may get it wrong. I think it's at _Coach S. Smith is where you can find me on Twitter or X, whatever you call it.
If you don't follow him at this point, then
you're probably not going to.
Yeah, then that's on you. You can find me on Twitter as well at Jack Pilgrim KSR. Go subscribe to KSR Plus. Make sure you're subscribed right here on the KSR YouTube channel as I get something in my eye as we wrap this thing up. Whatever, man. It is what it is. Go Cats. We'll see you hopefully after celebrating a big time win on Wednesday. We'll see you next time.